What's up, guys? This is Mr. Eldridge, and in today's video, we're going to look at the history of political parties. The history of political parties in the United States is rich and dynamic, reflecting changes in the nation's political and social environment over time. We're going to look at an overview of the major political parties and key developments in United States history. So first, let's talk about early factions from 1780 to 1790. In this time period, there are two major groups, the Federalists and the Democratic Republicans. The Federalists were led by figures like Alexander Hamilton, John Adams, and John Jay. The Federalists supported a strong government, a national bank, and close relations with Britain. They drew support from merchants in urban areas in the Northeast, specifically in the New England region. The Democratic Republicans were founded by Thomas Jefferson and James Madison. This party advocated for states' rights, an agrarian-focused economy, and opposed the Federalist policies. They supported a decentralized government and drew support from farmers in the West and the South. Next, let's talk about the era of good feelings and the rise of Jacksonian democracy in the 1820s and 1830s. The Democratic Republicans were split by 1824. The Federalist Party had already dissolved going into the election really of 1820, and the Democratic Republicans were split into two factions. The election of 1824, in its contentious four-way race, led to the end of the era of good feeling, a time of peace and prosperity on the surface, but underneath was a time of great despair over the institution of slavery, territorial expansions, and other debates in Congress. During this time period, you have two major groups, the Democratic Party and the National Republicans. The National Republicans were around from 1828 to roughly around 1833. This short-lived party was led by John Quincy Adams and Henry Clay. They evolved from the factions that opposed Andrew Jackson's policies. It later will morph into what we know as the Whig Party in the second party system. The Democratic Party was really born out of the election of 1824. Formed from the Jeffersonian tradition and led by Andrew Jackson, as well as Martin Van Buren, this party became the major force advocating for populism, states' rights, and expanding voting rights for white males. They supported westward expansion and opposed centralized banking, as well as being a strong supporter of the institution of slavery. The second party system is from 1830 to 1850. You have two major groups that are involved in this. First, you have the Whig Party. The Whig Party was around from 1833 to 1856 and was formed as a reaction to Andrew Jackson's policies. The Whigs supported modernization, a strong Congress, internal improvements like roads and canals, and they opposed what they saw as a Jacksonian authoritarian style of leadership. Prominent members are the great triumvirate of Whigs, including Henry Clay, Daniel Webster, and John C. Calhoun. The party eventually fractured over the institution of slavery and whether they were going to be a party that it would be either pro-slavery or anti-slavery. The Democrats during this time period remained the dominant force in American politics, continuing to advocate for states' rights and expansionism, including their controversial support over the institution of slavery. Next, we move into the Civil War era up to about 1890. There are two major parties and then one minor party. First, let's talk about the minor party in the American Party, also known as the Know Nothing Party. This was a nativist party that opposed immigration, particularly from Catholic countries like Ireland and Germany. It was very short-lived, but was significant in the lead up to the Civil War. Of course, you still have the Democratic Party, During this time period, they were largely split over the institution of slavery. Southern Democrats supporting the Confederacy, of course, during the Civil War, while Northern Democrats were generally less supportive of the abolitionist efforts, but were still supportive of the party overall. In 1854, you have the creation of the Republican Party. They were founded in response to the Kansas-Nebraska Act, which allowed for the expansion of slavery. The Republican Party emerged from former Whigs, a group called the Free Soilers, as well as anti-slavery Democrats. Abraham Lincoln, of course, was its first successful presidential candidate in 1860. The party advocated for the abolition of slavery, the stop of the expansion of slavery into the new territories, economic modernization, including their support of the Transcontinental Railroad, and strong federal government policies. Next, we move into a period known as the Gilded Age and the Progressive Era. You have still the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, ideological similarities, I guess you would say, but you do have some other parties. You have the Populist Party. The Populist Party was around from 1891 to 1908. They were also known as the People's Party. This was an agrarian movement represented by farmers and laborers who felt marginalized by industrialization. The Populists supported the idea of bimetallism and the free silver movement, the direct election of senators, and other reforms. While they dissolved after 1908, their platform influenced later progressive reforms, including that of Theodore Roosevelt and other progressive leaders during the Progressive Era. From 1890 to 1920, of course, you have the Progressive Era. Many Republicans and Democrats embraced progressive reforms during this time. The progressive wing of the Republican Party was particularly influential with Presidents Theodore Roosevelt and William Howard Taft, advocating for antitrust laws, labor rights, and environmental conservation. Next, we move into what is often called the Fourth Party System. This is from 1896 to 1932. During this time period, you are going to see a dominance of the Republican Party. Following the election of 1896, Republican William McKinley won against Democrat William Jennings Bryan. The Republicans were the dominant party. This era marked by pro-business policies, tariff protectionism, and of course, imperialism. You are going to see Democratic reformers, though. They were weaker nationally, but the Democrats embraced strong progressive reforms and figures like Woodrow Wilson, who pushed for income taxes, the Federal Reserve System, and other major reforms. From the 1930s to the 1960s, you have what's called the New Deal Coalition under Franklin Delano Roosevelt. The New Deal led to a realignment of the Democratic Party. FDR's policies promoted government intervention in the economy, labor rights, and social welfare programs. During this time, Republicans largely opposed the New Deal, advocating for smaller government and business-friendly practices. They remained weaker until after World War II, when they began to regain influence throughout the world. You then move into the 1960s through the 1980s and the Civil Rights Era, also known as the Southern Strategy for the Republican Party. The Democratic Party was significant in dealing with the civil rights movement. Under President Lyndon Baines Johnson, Democrats passed landmark civil rights legislations, including the 1964 Civil Rights Act, the 1968 Civil Rights Act, the Voting Rights Act, among others. Due to Southern whites feeling alienated because of this legislation, leading Democrats began to move over to the Republican Party, and Democratic dominance in the South waned because of that. The Republican Party was led by popular figures such as Richard Nixon and Ronald Reagan. With the implementation of the Southern Strategy, they began to attract disaffected white Southern voters. This era marked a shift of the South from Democratic to Republican strongholds, while the Republicans also attracted support from business interests and evangelical Christians. Finally, you have the current system from 1980 to present. Since the 1980s, the Republicans have become the party of conservatism, supporting lower taxes, deregulation, a strong national defense, and social conservatism, particularly on issues like abortion and gun rights. Ronald Reagan's presidency solidified the modern Republican coalition of fiscal conservatives, social conservatives, and defense hawks. Post-1980s, the Democratic Party has moved towards the center under figures like Bill Clinton, embracing free trade, welfare reform, and fiscal conservatism, while maintaining a strong focus on social issues like civil rights, health care, and environmental protection. It should be noted, too, we have seen a strong stance with the Democratic Party towards progressivism, with rights like LGBTQ rights, social rights, and going into more social programs, especially during the Obama administration. Through these years, since the 1960s, we have seen third-party movements. We've seen the promotion of civil liberties, free markets, and non-intervention in foreign policy under the Libertarian Party. The Libertarian Party has remained a minor but significant third party in U.S. politics. You've also seen the rise of what's called the Green Party. The Green Party focuses on environmentalism, social justice, and anti-corporate policies, running candidates in various elections, but have remained a small presence nationally. You've seen also another group called the Reform Party. Really started during the movement in the election of 1992 under Ross Perot. The Reform Party advocated for fiscal conservatism, government reform, and anti-corruption measures, and gained traction in, of course, the 92 election, as well as the 1996 election. Its influence since then, of course, has dropped. I hope you've enjoyed this video on political parties from the beginning of United States history. Thank you so much for paying attention. If you have not subscribed to this channel, please go ahead and do so now. Thank you so much, and you have a great day.